Good evening, folks. Welcome to Brewing Controversy. It's your favorite host, David. Unfortunately, Lucas is not here today. So for those of you who are expecting him, you'll just have to be satisfied with me because I'm more than enough. We've got a little bit of a busy show today, even though it's only one person. There's only one person to do the talking, which means hopefully we might actually be efficient this time, as opposed to listening to Lucas's meanderings. For those of you who haven't watched the show ever, I'm David. Normally I'm here with my co-host, Lucas. We like to drink beer and talk about current events and politics from a leftist slant. Not too leftist, mind you. We aren't communists here. There's no tankies. Tankies are not allowed. But we definitely probably skew a little bit further towards the left side of things. So we've got a bunch of stuff to do today, and I apologize if my eyes are wandering. Normally, Lucas has this set up because he's normally the producer guy, and I'm normally the one with, brains. So it's a little bit busy today with me splitting that up. By the way, if you're here, say hi. We'd love to hear from you. Feel free to comment as much as you want, how often as you want. We love to engage with our audience, and if you're watching this later, leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you too. We're very social people. Hi, Alicia. How you doing today? So yeah, we normally like to start things off just as sort of a refresher with what we like to call hot take happy hour. And so as you can see, we're still playing around with this because it's my idea. Just so everyone can keep track, no matter when you jump into the show, you can see what we're talking about today. And we're going to lead off our hot take happy hour with what's happening in Ukraine. So hopefully, if you've been paying attention, you realize the Ukraine has decided to go kick the Russians out of about a quarter of the territory that they've seized from Ukraine. And Vlad has gone mental, to put it mildly. So one of the rules about this war that have been taking place is Russia has special laws about when and where it can send its armed forces. It's supposed to keep the military in check in the country, because obviously if you're used to having an authoritarian regime, keeping a tight leash on the military is probably a big deal. That includes after the Soviet Union fell and you've got Russia, they very much wanted to keep a tight leash on the military. And one of the rules was only the standing army can go outside the country unless the territory of Russia is threatened. That was supposed to prevent things that the Soviets did, like Afghanistan, putting down the Hungarian Revolution, sending troops into Latvia, doing all these other things that the Soviet Union did. Part of what it was supposed to prevent was that the regular military can't leave the country. So what they're trying to do is declare that the parts of Ukraine that they've seized are in fact part of Russia. Although it's really convoluted because they claim that Ukraine is actually part of Russia. It's very confused about what's going on here. There's not a lot of clear logic that's happening. So right now, Vladimir Putin has ordered about a third of the regular army, or a third of the reserve army to mobilize. The regular army, just to clarify, the regular army can leave the country. He can't call up any reserves. I don't know if I was clear about that earlier. He can't, in other words, he can't ask people who have previously served, just like we do in the US, we call them the reserves. If you've previously served, you're on the hook to show back up if we get into trouble. So he can't call up the reserves. He can't draft anyone. He can't mobilize anyone. So he's mobilized about a third of Russia's reserves to try and go into Ukraine and fix this situation that is quickly deteriorating for them, because the Ukrainians pulled the mother of all fake outs, which is, we're going to hit you from the south. We're going to hit you from the south. We're going to hit you from the south. Hey, look at your social media. It says we're going to hit you from the south. We did this press conference about hitting you from the south. Oh, wait. No, we went north. So the situation is rapidly deteriorating. It looks like the northernmost province that the Russians have seized and sort of have laid claim to, Donetsk, is in serious danger of imminent collapse. That the Ukrainians might be able to take that back. And if they do take it back, the real danger is, what Putin really wants is a land bridge that goes from Russia to the Crimea. And if he can hold on to Luhansk province, which is the second province that they've taken besides Crimea, then he has a shot at that. If they take Donetsk province, there's nothing on the northern border of Luhansk province to stop the Ukrainians from cutting the Russian forces off. And the big deal is that if the Ukrainians can cut off the Russian forces in southern Ukraine by land, the Russians don't have the naval capacity to supply those troops by sea. They don't have the ability to reinforce them. They don't have the ability to resupply them. They don't have the ability to get things like fresh water. One of the jokes about Crimea, and the Ukrainians figured this out pretty quickly, is the Russians took the Crimean Peninsula and then busily learned the Crimean Peninsula doesn't have any fresh water. All the fresh water was being piped in from the mainland. And since you're not being controlled by Ukraine anymore, we're just going to cut off the fresh water. So it's a very siege situation if the Ukrainians can disrupt the ability for the Russians to resupply their forces through Luhansk province. So this has all gone very nutty for the Russians. They realize that they're on the verge of complete collapse, and that any moment this entire thing could become wildly untenable. So the Russians have now mobilized these forces. They've also started threatening nuclear attack. They have begun threatening that, and to clarify what they mean when they're saying nuclear attack, we Americans always imagine this massive exchange of like nuclear missiles and nuclear submarines and everything launching missiles. The Russians for a long time have been building up, and did build up before the end of the Cold War, and have continued actually building up these little things called tactical nuclear weapons. And the idea of behind tactical nuclear weapons is, if you've ever seen Starship Troopers, if you've ever read Starship Troopers, if you've ever watched Return of the Living Dead, when they have the cannon that fires the nuclear warhead, these are small weapons designed to blow up like 3 city blocks, or to severely disrupt an offensive from a massed formation of troops. We in the throes of General LeMay and his insanity about nuclear weapons, we briefly built some of these. We have since stopped. We stopped long ago. We've disposed of all but 100 of ours, which we keep in Germany explicitly to retaliate against the Russians with these tiny little nuclear weapons. So they are talking about deploying these in Ukraine. This is bad news, because if they use nukes, we're going to have to respond. It's not going to be good. We're going to have to do something, and it's not going to be pretty. So that's the situation in Ukraine. Luckily, most of the world is condemned. The only kind of worrying point is that the Baltic states, which are the tiny little countries that sit to the northeast of Poland, with Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, they are bracing for a potential Russian invasion now. They are very afraid, because the Russians want to. It's part of Putin has this really crazy notion, and he's used it before, and he's written papers on it before. And it's called escalate to de-escalate, which is if we bring the world to the edge of nuclear annihilation, you all will back down. I can still walk away with something from the table instead of nothing. Because right now the Ukrainians are threatening to leave him with nothing on the table. I can still walk away with something, and we can begin the process of de-escalation. And if you looked at it, at America's history with Vladimir Putin, this has happened a lot, right? This process of escalating, and then we're going to reset. We're going to de-escalate the problem. We're gonna go back to being friends, and then next time I want something, I'm going to ramp up the pressure until it's an absolute crisis, and then you'll give me even just a little bit of something to go away, right? It's in law. There's this idea of strike suits, which we got rid of in the United States, and slap provisions. And both these laws, laws against strike suits and laws against and slap laws. Strategic litigation. SLAP stands for strategic litigation against something policy. Against appropriate policy, I believe. But both those types of lawsuits are designed to be used to silence critics by just hammering away at them with the law. And basically what Vladimir Putin is trying to do is silence critics by scaring them. I have nuclear weapons. I'll use them, goddammit, if you don't do what I say. Well, we're not going to do what you say. Well, how about you do just this thing over here? And that's what he's looking for at this point, because he's lost the war. Even Russians recognize that he's lost the war. And it's not good, because he can't afford to lose the war. If he loses this war, either someone within the Russian government or the Russian military will depose him. And he's actually taking a very big risk right now by mobilizing these forces, because if they don't immediately see success, then he has a very real possibility of being subject to a military coup and being overthrown. So that's why he's talking about nuclear weapons. That's why he's trying to play fast and loose with all these things. Is he needs to ramp up the pressure so he can walk away with something, so he can show everyone that he won. Tasty. Next thing, labor shortage or hiring shortage. Now we keep on hearing about how there's not enough people to work. And I've always been very suspect of this evaluation, because before COVID, I have definitely been there in the room when employers have talked about, yeah, go ahead and put that job up. We're not actually going to hire for it. We actually just want to see who's in the market. And if either we can get someone better for the same price as the people that we're hiring, or if people are willing to work for less. And the idea was, generally speaking, to depress wages when this was happening. I feel like this isn't as much about depressing wages as it is depressing calls for better work-life balance. Productivity, I think, is what we're looking at. You hear in the news about quiet quitting and all this other stuff. It's not real. The real problem is that American employers have squeezed the last little bit of productivity out of workers. The last little bit of productivity without giving anything else per dollar from the American worker. And now they're having to hire people to add more product, to add more work hours. Before, they just kept on asking the people that they had, we need you to stay late. We need you to come in early. We need you to work weekends. We need you to hit these ever increasing quotas. Dell Computers here in Nashville is infamous for this really fun tactic. So by their agreement with the city, in order for them to avoid paying taxes, they have to hire X number of people every year. The thought is that it would encourage them to, repeatedly expand the plant, right? So that they would keep on making more computers. And in order to make more computers, they'd hire more people. Well, they didn't do that. They didn't want to do that. So instead, what they did is they headquartered a large portion of their sales force here, have kept the production line relatively static in terms of levels of employment. But what they'll do is they'll assign you a quota as a salesperson, and your first quota will be easily manageable. Your second, your third, your fourth, your fifth, your seventh, your eighth, your ninth will be well within the realm of possibility. Then your 10th or 11th, all of a sudden, that's a big quota. That's going to be tough to meet. But let's say you meet it. Next quarter's quota. That's a really big quota. That's going to be really tough to meet. But you know what? Maybe you get it. And now you get the next one. It's an impossible quota. It's something you can't possibly get. Hey, we need you to sell, $50 million worth of Dell products during this quarter. What? Huh? Can't do that. It's not going to happen. By the way, Brian, hi. How you doing? Yes, Lucas is cheap and doesn't know how to keep a schedule. That is correct. But we all knew this. At least everyone who's a regular viewer. I say it because I love. But no, so Dell, puts this impossible quota up, and when you don't meet it, they fire you. And then they hire someone new. So that way they can keep making their hiring quota by creating this revolving door. And in fact, actually, once you get fired, this happens to many people. Once you get fired from being unable to meet this impossible quota, within a few months, they'll be like, oh, hey, do you want to start back up again? We'll offer you, we're not going to offer you all the way at the top, but we'll start you out off at a higher tier than we did before, so you can make more money. But again, in 2 years, we're going to fire you so that we can make our hiring quota. So I've seen this behavior before, right? And the question is, are companies actually this desperate for workers? And I think on one hand, yes, because their productivity goals are down. And so their only solution now is to hire more workers. But on the other hand, do they actually want to hire these workers? Well, the answer is no, they don't. They want to save the money. I mean, the number that the American investor class hates the most is payroll. They hate payroll. Anything else, they hate payroll, and then right beneath that is research and development. They hate payroll. They hate research and development. They hate infrastructure development. And then everything else is, well, it can be negotiated. They hate those three things. Because they feel that they're all useless. And what does that add to my bottom line as an investor? You're spending my money on these things is how they think about it. You're spending my money on these workers. How dare you? These worthless peons. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I mean, that's where these people are thinking. And so, the question needs to start to be asked, like, are we actually having a labor shortage or are we having a hiring shortage? Are employers refusing to hire qualified candidates or near qualified candidates, as traditionally has been the case in the workforce? Hey, you're kind of close to qualified. Let me hire you, train you up, and then you'll be qualified. You seem like someone I can train up to do this job. And Nope. So, I mean, the question I feel needs to be put out there. We know American businesses have done this in the past. Are they doing it right now? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I feel like I hate to Tucker Carlson this, because now that I think about it, I'm like, this is very Tucker Carlson-esque about, I'm just asking questions. Well, which Tucker Carlson isn't actually asking questions. He's actually making an inference. And you know what? Again, unfortunately, so am I. But I'm saying this is past behavior of American business to do this, to play this game. And we keep on hearing these banshee wails of no one wants to work and they're quiet quitting and all of this. I think it's worth asking the question and putting it to you, all the viewers, to say, do you think it's a labor shortage or do you think it's a hiring shortage? Because I feel like if it was an actual labor shortage, we shouldn't have a problem fixing this really quick. How much are you going to pay me? If you're going to pay me $20 an hour in metropolitan Nashville to man a cash register, okay, we can talk about that. Because at that rate, it's possible for me to start considering, hey, I can at least afford a room, not a whole apartment, but a room in an apartment. Brian points out, no one wants to work as an age-old gripe that recycles itself about every 20 to 30 years. You're right. And it recycles itself, especially as a workforce begins to age. Employers and capitalists at the top don't want to promote or pay more to get people in the door to do the job. So, speaking of hiring versus labor, our grand and glorious Federal Reserve Chairman the other day decided to raise interest rates yet again. And let me tell you why this pisses me off. It pisses me off a lot. And we are, again, this is going to be a point of discussion later on tonight. But one of the things that pisses me off is, yes, raising interest rates can curb inflation. But it's rather like using a golf club to open a can of beans. Right? Does it work? Yeah. Is it pretty? No. No, ladies and gentlemen. No, my dear watchers. No, it is not pretty. It is not pretty. Can you open the can of beans? Sure. One way or another, you can open it. The problem with raising interest rates is that it's such a universal element, right? People's mortgages, people's car loans, people's 401ks, people's credit card debt. All of these are being impacted when you just raise the prime rate, right? And for those of you who don't know, just a quick rundown. So the prime rate is every night at 11:59 p.m. Federal law dictates that every bank has to have 10% of its deposits present in its accounts. It can loan out 90% of all the money that's in its accounts. In reality, it can loan out a lot more than 90%. It can loan out like 300, 400% of what are in its accounts. But at 11:59, at least in theory, it has to have 10% of its deposits present in its accounts. Now, they loan out, as I said, more than that. So how do they make up the difference? Well, they go to the Federal Reserve and they borrow from the Federal Reserve the amount that they need to get up to 10%. The Federal Reserve charges an interest rate on this money. Ironically, it's an interest rate for all of 3 minutes, because the next thing that happens at 12:01 is that all that money goes back to the Federal Reserve plus the interest. And that's what sets the prime rate, right? That's where the bank says, okay, so the Federal Reserve is charging, let's say the Federal Reserve is charging 1% interest, which it's well above 1% now. Federal Reserve is charging 1%. In order to make a profit, I need to charge 4% above that, because every night I have to give the Federal Reserve an extra 1% of 10% of my accounts in order to keep on loaning out money, right? which typically means I have to borrow the entire 10%. So that's why the prime rate is important, right? Because the bank now is having to pay the Federal Reserve money to loan out its money. That's how the Federal Reserve makes its money. Which I should point out that the Federal Reserve does not give that money back to the United States government. It has a undisclosed list of entities owning its stock, which conspiracy theorists get really mad about, and I can see why. I don't think there's anything nefarious in this. I think it's just rich people being rich people and being very assholish. It's not like some conspiracy to control the United States economy, because they could try, and that would be hilarious to watch. Because I'll be honest, most of these people are not that smart. It would, like, we would seriously already be clubbing each other over the heads with said golf clubs that I mentioned earlier, because we'd all be screwed at this point. It would be like The Road all day long. And really dark movie, by the way. I'm not a fan, actually. I normally like I can't get into that one. It's just so dark, especially the Coca-Cola scene. It's just, it hurts. Is that, well, it's dark. So I mean, hopefully, Brian, I told you why. So yeah, it's a blunt instrument. We shouldn't be using it this way. The Federal Reserve should be able to look at banks and say, if you want to borrow our money, you need to charge different interest rates to different parties. If you're Elon Musk, you get one interest rate. If you're Bobby Sue, Gene Wilder Thompson, you need to be, and you're just trying to buy a house with your, $20,000, $25,000 down payment, a different interest rate should apply, because the reason for inflation right now is not Bobby Sue, Gene Wilder Thompson buying a house or renting an apartment or buying himself, a new computer or whatever. That none of those are what's driving inflation. What's driving inflation, and we're going to get into this again a little bit later, is the very wealthy buying a lot of things. Yes. Yeah. It's Gene with a G, Olivia. It's Gene with a G. Willy Wonka. Thompson. Bobby Sue, Gene Wilder, Thompson. So last but not least, the band played on Ladies Edition. I know I don't like doing personal stories on this show. I like, casually things, but not sad things, not dark things. I like to have fun with stuff. But I mean, this was too dark. A friend of a friend recently had an incident here in Nashville at Vanderbilt Medical. They had an ectopic pregnancy. And they went in, and it was very obvious it was an ectopic pregnancy, and the doctors would not abort the pregnancy. They wouldn't abort the pregnancy. And they had to sit there with the lawyers. And here's the thing with ectopic pregnancies. Time is of the essence. Time is of the essence. The longer that unviable fetus continues to multiply and divide in a place not the uterus, the worse it gets. And it's literally an hour by hour thing. They finally agreed to do it, but only at the point where they had to give her a hysterectomy. And for those of you who don't know what that is, they had to remove her entire uterus in order to save her life. The Dom's decision is the most wretched, vile, and disgusting decision in the history of the United States of America. And that's saying something. Plessy versus Ferguson was bad. The Amistad decision was bad. These were all bad decisions. The the Locke decision, which basically said that employers can treat employees like slaves. The court had to when we discuss the Locke decision, we discuss, well, at least we're not as bad as that court that made that decision. Literally, that's a discussion that we have in law. Well, I mean, a court can be bad, but it's not as bad as the Locke decision. This Dobbs decision is the worst decision in the history of America, bar none. Bar none. Women are dying. Women are. I mean, just to be clear, this woman who wanted to get pregnant, and if she had an abortion, they'd remove the ectopic pregnancy within less than 7 hours of her sitting there on the table. She would still be able to have a child. But she can't now because the state of Tennessee has said, no, there will be no abortion ever, even if she dies, because God wills it. God wills that she dies. And there were a lot of things that I'd like to say about that, but they would, man, I wouldn't even blame Facebook or YouTube for banning us for what I'd like to say on that topic. I wouldn't even blame them. This woman wanted to have children. She should have been able to have children. She had an ectopic pregnancy. And because of the state of Tennessee's laws that say no to all sorts of abortions, because God wills your pain and suffering, God wills your death, God wills your infertility, not modern medicine, which is completely capable of dealing with this. Not modern medicine. Not logical, rational thought. God has willed that your uterus is a punishment from on high. You were made from Adam's rib bone. You are lesser. My penis makes me God's first creation. Aha! Fuck you. Fuck every last one of you, pro-life, anti-choice motherfuckers. Fuck you. Fuck you all. There are women right now who want to have children, and they have, because of your laws, and the number is growing every day, they will never have children because their uteruses have to be ripped out, because instead of performing a completely normal medical procedure of, it's an ectopic pregnancy, we need to get rid of it. We can't, because you all can't even comprehend. You believe it's all God's will. I want to let you know, when God actually lets his will be known, y'all gonna be real confused. Why is the devil got that spiny cock shoved all the way up my ass? I do not understand. It is shocking, and it is sad, and it has to stop. It has to stop. All right. On that note, on that wonderful, wonderful note, I've been drinking, and it's time to share with you all what I have been drinking. So it's time for the start of our segment. What you drink? So, for my first beer this evening, and see, normally my plan was I really enjoy making Lucas pronounce these German names all the time. It's hilarious to me because he hates it. He hates it so much. But now I'm the one who has to do this. So this is the N. Descher Bergbach Hill from Kloster Brewery Andex. And it is a Boxhell, Maybach, or Lentbach. See, I want to clarify what's going on with these names along the bottom here. Well, let me also turn off the hot take happy hour thing. That would be helpful. The Bochel, the Maybach, and the Lentbach are all the same thing. It just depends on where in Germany or the Netherlands you are. So this is, and I poured it before the show, mostly because I know when I have to do all the talking, obviously I can't do as much drinking as I would normally prefer for this sort of event. The really interesting thing is, they make this big deal about, it's like the brewery thinks that this is supposed to be fairly hoppy. And I talked with my guys at Reds, and they're like, we know it's not the line because we've cleaned the line multiple times. It's got a little bit of a cherry flavor to it, and it's a little weird. I mean, it has hops, and maybe it's because I'm a dirty, filthy American who's used to, like my backup spare beer right here, this Helix Rising from Trim Tab, this double IPA with, Chinook, Simcoe, and Sequoia hops. Like, that's hoppy. That is hoppy. This Bach is not hoppy. I gotta say that my only complaint against it is it loses its carbonation really fast. Like I feel like the way it pours, it starts out with a great head, and up until most recently when I've been drinking it, it's been great. But now that I'm getting to the bottom, no, it's still got the carbonation. It's still there. But the cherry flavor is not leaving. And I will say this. This is a monastery brew. And in my experience, one of the things that can happen sometimes with monastery brewed beers is we can get a little bit of inconsistency. Sammy Klaus is always my favorite example because you can have 1 year of Sammy Klaus that tastes like an IPA almost, or a Belgian double, and then you can have one the next year that tastes like someone shoved 1,000 loaves of banana bread into a keg and like jumped up down on top of it like a Looney Tunes cartoon, just like jumping up and down on the banana bread to stuff more banana bread into the keg, and then it somehow liquefied and fermented and became beer, and then we poured that, and now it tastes like liquid banana bread. So monasteries, I feel like, don't have a very good track record with being super consistent with their beer. Every year is going to be a little bit different, and sometimes it's availability of stuff on their monastic estate that they're using to brew with. Oh, well, we don't have as many hops this year, or we tried playing around with a different type of hop, and it came out this way. We didn't have, like, our orchard wasn't as productive this year, and this is what we used to eat. So we didn't put as much of it into beer. So it can, even things like, hey, we didn't have enough money for new barrels this year, so we just reused the ones from last year, and there was a little bit of stuff left in them, so that brewed with that. It's just not as consistent, and I feel like from their description of what it should be, which is a Bach, and I guess it is a Bach. It's just a Bach with a really weird cherry flavor. Yeah. It's not bad, but it is interesting. I want to put up. You found Shipyard Smashed Pumpkin Bourbon Barrel bourbon barrel aged pumpkin. So last week we had the tailgate barrel project milk stout. Shipyard normally makes a pretty solid pumpkin, so I may have to dragoon Lucas into traipsing about Yankee Land to go find me some of this bourbon barrel aged pumpkin ale from Shipyard. That sounds really good. And then, in honor of Lucas, we're going to go ahead and put this up. We don't have an official video for this, but Brian likes to share with us every week his non-beverage inspired intoxicant. Well, you didn't do anything new, Brian. It's okay. So it's Gorilla Crip, which I don't remember your specific description of Gorilla Crip. I would have to go look at a past show. But 26% THC. I have no idea. I feel like that's high. I guess I don't know. I go to Buds and Brews here, and I get the THC infused ginger shots, which are thoroughly girly and very nice. The only way we can legally consume THC in the South, or at least in Tennessee, is in our alcohol. Brian apologizes. Straight availability is sometimes limited. I understand. I understand. I have to, there's a reason I set up the stuff that I do the way that I do, so that I can regularly get a hold of new and creative beer. And Olivia puts up, I'm in there counting now. So it's okay. So yeah, we can stash some. I can again, I'm just going to dragoon Lucas and be like, you have to go visit Olivia and bring me back some of Shipyard pumpkin beer, which he will hate beyond all measure. Because if there's one thing, Lucas hates many things quite a great deal. And I enjoy torturing him with these things that he hates, such as pumpkin beer or being ordered around to go bring me pumpkin beer. He thinks it's fine when he orders me around to go bring him beer. He thinks that's fine. No. It's my turn. It's my turn. Lucas can go bring me some pumpkin beer. See, I don't have a producer tonight. See, Lucas normally uses like me talking over him to hide when we have to move banners around because we don't have this super automated. So we normally have two topics tonight, and this one's going to be kind of brief. I'm not going to lie. It's a little bit more esoteric than usual. This land is my land, but is it your land? Now, what do I mean by this? I mean, how do we address things on a national level? This is a rather esoteric idea that I've been fumbling around with in my head, and I was supposed to, at least hopefully, have some co-hosts tonight to bounce it off of, and I thought, maybe I shouldn't do this without co-hosts, but I'm still going to do it anyway. And I'm just going to try and keep it brief without sounding too much like a nerdy professor for the next 15 or so minutes, which I don't necessarily know is possible. We have a lot of major problems in this country. We have a lot of major problems with regards to abortion and the right of women to have reproductive freedom. We have a lot of problems with regards to how taxation is applied. We have a lot of problems with regard to housing. We have a lot of problems with regard to debt, consumer debt. If you ask me about national debt, I will go on literally until the end of time to explain to you why it's a good idea and why it doesn't fucking matter. We have a lot at policing, right? Policing is another big thing. We have these problems that we keep on seeing in multiple places in the U.S. And it strikes me that we might have reached the end of federalism as we know it.
Now, what do I mean by that? Over 200 years ago, you had 13 separate rural, very rural colonies, comparatively. I mean, New York then versus New York now, New York would have been a village. All the way up until the middle of or almost the middle of the 20th century, the northern half of Manhattan was freaking uninhabited. It was farmland. You had people talking about like, oh, I remember when like in Manhattan, like in the 1930s, 1940s, like, oh, I remember when all this was farmland. And now it's all buildings. That's pretty freaking intense. We have built quite a lot up from when we first established the colonies and when we first established the Constitution. And yes, for those of you who have watched the show, I am going to go slightly into my perennial vetch of we need a new Constitution, but I'm going to give different reasons today. So it's new and improved. When we did this, we were not a super united country. Georgia was radically different than, say, New York. In New York, you had a bunch of guys who would like to go hunt a rapidly disappearing species for their fat to render into lamp oil. And in the South, you had people who would like to beat and rape people with black skin and make them grow crops. Very different goals were involved in this. Both of them wanted to be free, not to have the other people be free, but for them to be free. And we built our country around this idea of federalism. In other words, New York has rights and privileges distinct to it that are not held by the federal government, by the central government in D.C. Same way Georgia has rights and privileges that areas in which they govern exclusively, which they have exclusive sovereignty over and away from the central government, over and away from the government, from the United States Congress in D.C. And all of that, in its own sometimes perverted way, made sense. Made good sense. We should do this. Why? Because it takes a week for a post writer to get from D.C. to Savannah, Georgia. Then at that time, the most populous city in Georgia. We can't have everyone constantly asking the central government what to do. And honestly, who would like to do that all the time? I have to wait a week to find out if I could plow this field or do this other mundane thing. No, I should be able to go to my local council or go to my state assembly and ask if I can do that. I shouldn't have to go to a federal court. I should be able to go to my state court where they know me and they know the issues. That makes perfect sense. Here's the problem, though. It doesn't take a week to get from D.C. to Savannah, Georgia anymore. It takes like an hour and a half at most. It takes 4 hours to get from one side of the hemisphere to the other. And let alone communication, right? It's instantaneous. We have a government set up and an idea set up about letting local governments deal with local issues in a way that's increasingly becoming untenable. And let me explain why this is kind of coming to the forefront for me. Someone posted on the Nashville subreddit, and the interesting thing was they said they were reposting this from some other city's subreddit about Californians moving in and buying all the houses and running all the prices up. There's a meme. And I said, how odd is it that some other city, someplace entirely different than Nashville, is having the exact same problem? Oh, wait, it's not actually that odd. That completely makes sense. California is one of the largest economies on the planet, not the country, the fucking planet. Of course, people will look around and be like, what do you mean? I can take this money that I have here that makes me, relatively middle class in California and move to Tennessee and be land rich? Well, hell yeah, I'm going to go do that. Or Georgia, or Alabama, or Mississippi, or Kentucky, or Indiana, or pick your state. Pick your smaller Midwestern metropolis. It applies to all of them. But we have a national problem and no national solution because we don't think of it as a national problem, do we? Because California is not part of the nation. It's a state in the nation. See where this begins to fall apart? Same thing with policing, right? We recognize that we have a national problem with police brutality. Minorities, white people, all over the place. There was an incident recently with the Colorado State Police with a white man. He managed to run himself off the road. Called 911. Informed 911. Yes, I have 2 hunting knives in the car. But he needed assistance. Well, and the police arrived first. Because of course they did. The man had since fallen into some sort of fugue or agitated state. He asked the police if he could throw his hunting knives out the window at them because the police had become, at some point in this maneuver, he didn't want to get out of the car because he was having some sort of panic attack in his car that had run off the road. And the police decided to treat that as something dangerous. And he asked if he could throw his hunting knives out the window. They said no. So I understand the logic that he had when he got out of the car and he wanted to show that he had both of them at arm's length and wanted to lay them down. And they drilled him. Killed him. Right there. And the worst thing is that you can hear, because these are not smart people, their body cams and the mics were on the entire time. They knew they didn't have to kill him. They knew they didn't have to kill him. They just wanted to. They just wanted to kill this guy. We have a policing problem in America, and it's a national problem. It's not a Colorado problem. It's not a Tennessee problem. It's not a Georgia problem. It's not a New York problem. It's not a California problem. It's a national problem. But because of the current species of federalism we all inhabit in, we don't have a national solution. All of us have the same problem. I mean, it really goes back to the foundation of the country. What united the country? Well, we all have the same problem. The British. And we all united. We threw out the British. Sorta. With a lot of French help. But we're still playing this game where California's problems are its own problems. And Tennessee's problems are its own problems. And it's not working anymore. It's really not. We need to have a national conversation about the fact that Californians are moving out of their state and running up the prices in a lot of Midwestern cities. We need to have a national conversation about this, about how the hell we're going to do this. Because personally, I feel like California needs to pay these states money to build more affordable housing. If you want to have your residents who've been paying your taxes move out and flood our markets, we need to have some sort of compensation so that we can have affordable housing, so that someone like me or any one of a number of other people can afford a house or rent or anything. I mean, one of the last major affordable housing projects in Nashville. Adjust the camera just slightly. There we go. Sorry, it's been bugging me for a while. I apologize. One of the last oh god. That's what I get for trying to be creative. There it goes. One of the last major affordable housing complexes in downtown Nashville is being closed. It's been bought up by developers, primarily because of the pressure from non-natives moving into the city and buying up property, running it up. And there's no place for those people to live. There's no place for those people to move. Right? They're not. I had someone offer me a job the other day in Mount Juliet. I realized I could move to Mount Juliet for that job, but I already have a place here in the west side of town. It'd be an hour commute each way. Now, I'm lucky. I have reliable transportation, but a lot of people don't. And I've actually gotten into arguments with people about this, but like the fact that new developers are trying to get around this idea of we have to provide parking spaces, which in any other major metropolitan area, I'd understand. But the only problem is we have no functional public transit here in Nashville. So how are you going to move around? These are now becoming national problems. And we need to start thinking about national solutions. And I mentioned this idea about national solutions because it also happens on the other side, right? I don't feel like either Democrats or Republicans are actually content with the current state of federalism. Why? Well, Senator Graham would like to introduce a national abortion law after we had this whole conversation about abortion being a states' rights issue. Now he wants to introduce a national abortion law. I don't think either side is comfortable with the level of federalism that we've adopted. I don't think either side feels good about how this is working out. And I think it's time that we need to have a conversation about how much power, how much authority, how much value do we place in the borders of the state of Nebraska? Is Nebraska fundamentally different from Kansas? Is Kansas fundamentally different from Iowa? Is Iowa fundamentally different from Minnesota? Is Minnesota fundamentally different from Michigan or Wisconsin? I would argue no. There's no fundamental difference. And it's time that we stopped operating off a system of federalism that pretends that Minnesotans are fundamentally different than New Yorkers. We have different ideas about a lot of things, ideology. But the issues in New York and the issues in Minneapolis are not very dissimilar. The issues in Yonkers, New York, are not that different from the issues of the suburbs of Minneapolis. We have national problems, and we keep on trying to treat them like it's a state-by-state issue, and they're not. We need to do something about that. I finished my diatribe. Fortunately, again, because I'm the only one doing the show. Next comes the next beer. That's still just a hair too bitter to chug. Oh. Okay. There we go. I'm still going to try and fix my camera just a little bit. All right, I'm better with it. So now that I've chugged the remainder of that, it's time for... All right, so time for another round. Oh. So this one I'm actually kind of a little bit excited about. And I'm doing this slightly to taunt Lucas yet again. Because that's really like half my life is making fun of that fat asshole. I say this as a fat asshole. This is so they put this down as KBS. It's actually Founders. It's actually Founders Brewery, and this is their maple Mackinac fudge. So y'all get to watch the pour of this. Oh, and also I get to actually fix the banner here. Again, no producer today. Just me. Just me. So this is an Imperial Double Coffee. Oh. And I want to point out, this has a very, like, persistent layer of head. I turn my mug around because normally my little nameplate there gets in the way. That is a very nice, persistent level of head. That is a good stout right there. Porter, I don't want that much head. Stout, I want a little bit of head. That is the right amount of head for that. You're not forgive me. I've been trying not to use my nose. I'm a little stuffed up. It's false fall turning into third summer here in the South, which means it's yet again sinus season because stuff that was very content to die is coming back. All right, it has a lot of chocolate on the nose. You know, with something like a Bach, I'm not going to hold my nose over it. Because it's not worth the time. An IPA, maybe. Most lagers, it's not worth your time holding your nose over. But an ale yeast, it can tell you things. And that has a very dark chocolate nose. Huh. I mean, I don't hate it. But it's got a bright alcohol streak straight down the middle. Real bright alcohol streak. Yeah. I mean, it's not wound care level. It's not like, oh, I would recommend this for triage. Pour this on the gunshot wound. It's not that bad. But yeah, no, and I can taste. I feel like the coffee flavor is actually feeding into the alcohol flavor, and that's what's creating little. It's a little perfect storm situation where you have a lot of coffee flavor that's in there. The more I chew on it, the coffee flavor hangs out a while, but it feels like the bitterness and the coffee flavor is melding with the high because this is an 11%. Make sure I had that right. Yeah, this is an 11%, so it's got high alcohol for a beer. I feel like the coffee flavor is melding with that coffee with the alcohol element, and it's enhancing it. It's making it more penetrating than I would normally expect. I mean, here's the thing: like dark chocolate and high alcohol normally ends with a dark bittersweet front end and then ethanol that you could run a car off of on the back end. This actually doesn't end with alcohol, which I'm happy with. I feel good about that. Uh, we didn't fuck it up entirely. I'm not getting the fudge though. If they were supposed to be like the sweetness of fudge, I'm just getting dark chocolate. I mean, I'm getting. I hate to say it, and because again, I normally like to taunt Lucas because this is Founders Brewery, this KBS, but it is Founders Brewing Company, which is right down the street from where Lucas lives. And I normally like most of their stuff. I just, I don't dislike it. But the alcohol note is just so present. And I'll be honest, in beer, if mm, there are a lot of things you can do to cover up a bad alcohol note. What I suspect happened, from my experience, is they went to go brew this and it didn't ferment right on them, which happens. You can have something that doesn't ferment quite right on you and gets messy and nasty on you. And you have two choices. I honestly prefer what Founders did with this choice because when it goes weird on you, your choices are to cover it up with a bunch of other flavors or try and incorporate that weird fermentation into something else. They let the yeast do its job, which 9 times out of 10, that's what I'm all about. Let the yeast do its job. Don't churn out a 4.5 or 5% beer where the yeast hasn't done its work. Let it go to 6, let it go to 6.5, let it go to 7, let it go to 8. And let the yeast do what the yeast does, which is eat sugars, make alcohol, and give off these other flavors. This, I feel like something went bad with the fermentation, and they ended up with so early on in the fermentation process, you end up with what we like to call diesel, right? It tastes like diesel fuel. It's not good. You hope that once the yeast continues to eat stuff and you give stuff for the yeast to eat, that it gives the beer another flavor. That doesn't always happen, though. I'd say about 20% of the time when you're doing this, especially in large batches in the foeder, yeah, it can get pretty. It can stay pretty diesel, and I feel like this is something that may have stayed diesel. This is something where the yeast produced an undesirable flavor. And they tried to compensate. And here's the thing. Normally the way you compensate is with fruit. And here's why. Fruit flavors cover up all sorts of sins. You're going to have I'll give the classic example of one of my favorite beers is Trim Tab Euphoria Now, which is they fruit the holy hell out of that thing. And it's like 14 fucking percent alcohol. It doesn't taste like wine. It tastes like beer. It tastes like really sweet, amazing beer. And it will get you flat on your ass in no time at all. I want to like this. I want to. It just... I can't quite get myself there. I can't tell. I feel like the alcohol note destroys what would otherwise be a very oh, I feel bad for that. I do. I feel bad for it. I'm gonna stop talking about it because it hurts my heart to talk about Founders Brewery that way. It really does. In the same way that it hurt both me and Lucas's hearts to talk about Tailgate Lucky Charms that one day and be like, oh my God, this is the worst beer that we've ever had in our entire lives. We were both like, I wish I didn't have to say this, but yes, it is the worst absolute beer that we've ever had. This is very far from that. This is not a bad beer. It's just for what it could be. I had such high expectations for this beer. It's not there. It's not there. All right. So, for the last topic of the evening, and the one that was promised. Oh, nope. I can find it. Ha. The Empire State Strikes Back. The New York Attorney General hitting Trump where it hurts. There's a lot of stuff that to unpack with this civil suit. There's a ton of stuff to unpack. The first thing is, from my perspective, this is a great maneuver. And the reason it's a great maneuver is civil suits and criminal complaints operate on very different sets of rules. A criminal complaint has very strict rules of evidence and very strict rules about what you can bring in and what you can't, right? It's not just the evidence. It's also what you can ask, what witnesses you can present, how those witnesses are to be interpreted, all sorts of things, from a civil trial to a criminal trial. Also, entirely different rules of the conduct of the court, right? How the court is supposed to receive evidence, how the court is supposed to receive motions. I actually think this is a brilliant maneuver by the New York Attorney General to get at Trump. And the reason is because I think the way Trump has set this up with his mob-like connections, that getting a criminal case all the way through and getting it to beyond a reasonable doubt, he's made that very, very hard. But, for a civil suit, makes a lot of sense. Now we're going to come back to a lot of stuff. I'm like, hey, we're going to talk about that later. Hey, we're going to talk about that later. Hey, we're going to talk about it later. Hey, we're going to talk about that later. This is what this suit is about. So the key element that Musk uses, that Bezos uses, that Gates uses, that every large oligarch in America uses to keep their wealth is they don't actually have 56, 200, whatever $1 billion cash. They don't have a drug lord's hoard stashed in a car wash a la fucking Heisenberg anywhere, right? That's not happening. Also, they wouldn't. The FDIC only guarantees $250,000 per account. So they spread it out over multiple accounts and investments. Investments. But here's the big thing. They don't pay for those investments. That's part of how they get their money. What do you mean? Well, if I have $5 million spread out over multiple accounts in the bank, and I go to the bank and I say, I want a loan. The bank is going to ask for how much. They're just going to ask, where can I drool on you, sir? Right? It's not even a question. They're like, you give us a shit ton of money that we could loan out and make more money off of. We would like to, of course, make you a loan. Because we want to make sure that your money stays in our bank. And when that bank asks, so what interest rate would you like to pay on this loan, Sahib? And Bezos answers, well, let's just keep it at prime or less than prime. The bank says, yes. And can I lick the sole of your boot while I'm doing that? Right? That's what they do. This is how this happens. The way the rich keep on getting richer is not that they're making more jobs or doing more innovation or anything else. Is that they have higher access to capital, right? And I've bitched about this multiple times on the show. Yes, I'm going to bitch about it again. It's that they have more access to capital, right? They have money in the bank, and anyone who has either money in the bank or collateral assets, which also kind of ties back into what I was talking about, national issues, and especially about rent and housing. If I own more houses, if I own more apartment units that I'm renting out, then the bank wants to loan me more money. The reason is because I have more collateral, right? If I fuck up on the loan, if I fuck off and just run off with the money, then the bank can claim whatever I put up as collateral. They'd rather not, but they feel more secure about it, don't they? I don't mind you just fucking off as much as this guy who put up no collateral. And that's why I'm making him put down a down payment, is because, well, I need to make sure that he's going to pay on the loan. So the main thing that keeps the rich in America is access to capital. The fact that they can go to the bank and borrow whatever they want. This is one of the places where interest rates can be effective. To say, hello, Mr. Musk. Fucking asshole. Your interest rate is now 7% to borrow from the bank. Now, no bank is actually ever going to charge Elon Musk 7%. They're going to charge him 3.5%, 2%. Simply because they want to keep his money in their bank. And the really cool thing is when he goes out and spends money and buys more stuff and does these things, he generates more debt, actually, from other people getting involved in it, which again gives them more interest. Yay, bank, more interest. It's what we're about. I just knocked my camera again. No, there we go. Okay. So Trump has been pulling this scam for multiple years of I'm rich and therefore I have access to a lot of interest. But Trump has been doing it the low rent way. Trump has been doing it, ironically, the middle class, I'm a Trump voter and I like Trump way, which is by overvaluing his real estate by a lot. By a lot. Now, there's some disagreement about whether or not he's been overvaluing it to the banks and then undervaluing it to the state. I don't feel confident, given the documentation that I have at hand right now, of commenting on that, other than that sounds about right. I give one number to the state of New York and one number to the bank, and the bank never checks it. That sounds. I, the bank, am going to loan you $2 billion. Did I bother to check your property tax return? No, I didn't. Nah, I didn't do that. I paid someone to do that, and they didn't do it, and I don't care. That sounds bankish. But that he was overvaluing his estates by, in some cases, 100% to the bank in order to secure, again, those loans. So again, the two ways you secure loans, those super nice loans, are I have a bunch of property that you can take as collateral, or I have a bunch of money in your accounts, which you see and then want to loan me money. It's even best when you have both. Pardon me. Which Trump claimed to have both. He had a lot of money in those banks accounts, and then he also had these what he claimed were these extreme valuable estates. And I just want to put this up. Yeah, he hasn't been having a good time lately, Olivia. You're right. And Brian, tax fraud is a great way to take him down. That is correct. Most people forget that's how we took down Capone. We didn't take Capone down for murder or bootlegging or anything else. We took him down for income tax fraud because he failed to claim all the money that he was making off of bootlegging on his income taxes. The IRS is nothing to fuck around with. Pay your taxes. Even in Tennessee, I actually know a guy who was a drug dealer, and the way they got him was on tax fraud, because Tennessee actually does require a tax stamp on marijuana. You aren't allowed to actually receive it, but you are required by law to pay a tax on marijuana, and he failed to pay the tax on marijuana, and yeah. So, no, it's a complex topic. I'm going to put on a slight interlude for just a moment. I have an issue at the door here. We're going back. But enjoy me cursing Putin. So the fun story is one of the nice things that Lucas provides me is or commercial breaks. If you've ever seen a news show, is bathroom breaks. uh, so back to the point. Trump has run into this situation where he's been overvaluing his properties by as much as 100% to New York state financial and tax authorities. And that sounds bad. That sounds awkward. I just want to point out to Brian, yay, a movie. Yes, because we don't actually have commercials. I wish we did. But we don't. So if I need a break, I have to throw on Ukrainian music videos. So what does this mean for Trump? Well, the main thing that it's about is lying to financial institutions. Now, I'm going to be clear. Deutsche Bank, Citibank, all these other financial institutions know that these guys who are walking in with a lot of real estate and not a lot of money in their accounts are lying. They know they're lying. They know they've overvalued their property to get better rates on loans, to go buy more property, or to go invest in other institutions, right? Or to go do stupid things like buy a shit ton of stock, right? Happens all the time. They know they're lying, but the problem is that they want their business. And so they'll do it, right? They know Trump isn't telling the truth when he says that Mar-a-Lago is worth $750 million. When in Florida, it's appraised for $75 million. Still more than you or I will ever see in our entire lifetimes, but it's a big difference. It's 100% difference, right? 100 times difference, rather, not 100%. The situation with this lawsuit is dramatic because one of the key things that it's doing is saying Trump is guilty of fraud to financial institutions. And this is one of the key things about this being a civil case versus a criminal case. This is a civil case of we are suing him because he lied to New York State and financial institutions. And we as New York State have an interest in making sure that our financial institutions are not lied to. Not that he's committed a criminal act with those bars of evidence, but that he's committed a civil infraction with different levels of evidence. Sadly, a civil conviction is not necessarily admissible in a criminal case, but it can go a long way towards building a criminal case. The fact that Trump has had to plead the fifth multiple times during his deposition, almost all the time during his depositions leading up to this case, are kind of proof that no, there's criminal action here. And if we can prove the civil case and get more documents, get more evidence, then we can prove a criminal case against him for fraud, specifically tax fraud. And I want to now bring in this little note from Brian. Tax fraud is a great way to take him down. Yes, it is. Because it's likely that if he's lying to the banks, he's been lying to the state of New York. This leads to an additional question. Why the fuck should anyone care what the state of New York is doing to Donald Trump? So, where you incorporate matters in the U.S., again, leading back to our earlier topic of nationalism, us acting as a nation versus us acting as several separate states that have strangely the same yet different issues, which doesn't make any sense, obviously, which is the point of the last segment. But you want, depending on where you incorporate, you get different courts of venue, right? And you want that. For instance, everyone incorporates in Delaware because everyone wants, every corporation wants to incorporate in Delaware. Bye, Brian. Sorry, I can't hang. Gotta run. Much aloha. Aloha, Brian. Bye-bye. But you want to incorporate in Delaware for this reason. You get a crack at the Delaware Chancery. The Delaware Chancery is very corporate friendly, is very friendly to the interests of large money powers. And most corporations want that. New York is also a desirable place to incorporate. Well, why do I want to incorporate New York? Well, because it makes getting certain things, especially contracts, done easier. If I'm a New York corporation and you're a New York corporation, and we need to have the court settle something, we can both settle this in New York. It's very quick and easy, especially if it's New York City, right? We go to the New York Civil Court, bang, boom, done. It's over. We got it settled, right? Except, of course, if you can't incorporate in New York, now we have a problem, right? Because we can't do that anymore, can we? We can't just go to a New York City court and have them validate a contract, settle a contract. In New York, a lawyer has to be involved in mortgages, right? A lawyer has to be involved in you buying a house to make sure that the mortgage contract is acceptable, which requires at least some level of intervention from the court. If I can't incorporate New York, then I have a problem, which is really what this is about. Which is if the Trump organization can no longer incorporate in New York, can no longer be a valid corporation in New York, then its ability to conduct business with big money is severely curtailed. Severely. Because it can't go to a judge in New York City. It can't go to a judge in Albany. It can't go to a judge in anywhere in New York and have things quickly and easily settled. Because they're no longer a New York corporation. They can hold on to their Delaware incorporation and still have access to the Delaware Chancery. But they're not going to be able to hold on to that New York incorporation and the easy money it provides, right? Because if I'm the bank, right, and I need to, begin foreclosure proceedings against you, Donald Trump, who keeps on putting up land as a collateral asset, and I can't go to a New York court to get this settled, that's gonna run up your interest rate. Because now I've got to have someone else in another state, likely the state where the property is actually held, or the country in which the property is actually held, often not issue with the Trump organization, and have them be present to settle the matter if you can't pay on the loan, which Donald Trump regularly has had problems paying on the loan. Considering the number of times he's declared bankruptcy. So Trump has a very big issue with the civil case that's coming up. And I also want to point out it's also working in tandem with the January 6th Commission and the issue before Judge Cannon. Then I didn't set this up as a separate topic because it's really about all of Trump's legal woes. But he hasn't had that much luck in Florida this week either. Judge Deary basically straight up looked at him and said, why should I believe that you've declassified any of this? You haven't given me any documentation to that effect. Why should I believe you? And I want to point out, these banks believed Trump when he just handed them random documents that said Mar-a-Lago was worth $750 million. The federal government is not nearly as gullible as Deutsche Bank or Citibank or Wells Fargo or any of these other institutions, right? They're going to delve a lot deeper into, you say this is worth this. Can you explain that valuation? So he's got a problem on that front, but it's a growing problem of Trump has a bad habit of lying about a lot of things, right? He lied to the National Archives. He lied to the DOJ. The only person who's been busily trying to cover for him has been Judge Cannon in Florida, who got wretchedly overruled today by the 11th Circuit, who basically clearly spelled out how she had overstepped her jurisdiction in a variety of areas about trying to pause the Department of Justice investigation into Trump's violations of the Espionage Act. And she's been thoroughly overruled. Judge Deary has come back and said, if you declassified this, I need to have proof that you did so, and they haven't been able to provide any. But all those are nice. Those are all criminal issues. But what Letitia James is doing in New York, however, hits Trump where it hurts. It hits him in his money. Trump keeps all this afloat by constantly dangling more money in front of people. If he has to pay $250 million out of pocket to make this go away, he's done. He doesn't have $250 million. His organizations don't have $250 million. He has wrecked himself utterly on this topic. If it was anyone else, I'd say that this would be an easy to get out of issue. But because it's Trump, he's worked himself so deep into a hole of his own making. I don't see a good way out for him on this. He's going to get sued, and he's going to have to disgorge $250 million. And the irony of which is he'll try and draw on his supporters to meet that $250 million. And I don't know if he'll be able to do it anymore because, again, he won't be able to have a valid incorporation in New York anymore. It's a bit tricky. But it is a big blow against his criminal behavior and where he's been with his activities, in his fundraising, everything else. So, it's about 10 minutes over where I wanted to be. I apologize if I haven't been able to delve into this last topic as deeply as I wanted to. Unfortunately, I talked too much for other things. Which happens, when I'm by myself, Lucas. So, I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Please like and subscribe. We very much appreciate it. We would very much like to be higher on the YouTube algorithm. strongly encourage you to go out and talk to your friends. Be like, hey, these two drunk idiots like to talk about really cool stuff on a regular basis, and they talk about beer a bunch. And so we'd really like to talk with. We'd like to talk with you, and we'd like to talk to your friends. We'd like to talk to everyone, mostly, except for Nazis. That's never fun. It's like I keep on seeing that scene of Indiana Jones' Last Crusade. Like, this is how Austrians say goodbye. Well, so Germans say goodbye. Slap. The Austrians say goodbye the same way. All fascists say this goodbye the same way. It's always the slap. It's not. There's no kissing involved. They're not that pretty. Thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate it. And as always, our sign off in the tradition of Murrow. Good night, good evening, and good luck.